Well, hello, my darlings. I am going to try to get through time period 7 in very few minutes. Um, this is the time period we finished up right before, um, well, we almost finished it before spring break, and then we finished it up sort of last week. This is Frederick Jackson Turner, The Frontier Thesis, The Closing of the Frontier, based on a faulty census. We're looking for why do we go overseas? Why do we go into Guam and Puerto Rico and the Philippines? Well, the frontier was closed. We needed more money. We needed more places to settle. Um, we had to colonize and Christianize. The white man's burden. All of these crazy, crazy theories. Now, the economics isn't crazy. In the closing of the frontier, it's fallacious but not crazy. We believe the frontier is gone. So if we want to settle into wild open spaces and untamed areas, then we had to go elsewhere. And you know as well as I do that you can go to Wyoming today, though other people have that idea as well. And you can settle, you can build your sod hut, whatever, and you can have your cell phone. Um, Our overseas expansion leads us directly to the Spanish American War. Absolutely, we're concerned about what the Spanish are doing to the Cubans. We're more concerned about the fact that Cuba's 90 miles from the United States would make a great kind of satellite base. So we go in and we fight. And one of the battalions is led by a volunteer guy named Theodore Roosevelt, who we've heard of before and we will hear of again. He leads the charge up Kettle Hill. He leads the charge up San Juan Hill. And at 40 years old, the married husband of 5 children, he becomes a war hero. He's already been a cowboy and all of the things we've talked about. This is Emilio Aguinaldo. After the Spanish American War, we gained Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Now, the Filipinos fought with us to rid themselves of Spanish rule. But they were our allies, they were our buddies and our friends. We fought in the trenches side by side with Aguinaldo and others, and then we turned on them. And this is not hyperbole. This is not my interpretation. We led them to believe they would become independent. Instead, once the Spanish are banished and things wash out in documents and treaties and whatever, we own the Philippines. They probably could have put up with that if we had granted them self rule. We did not. We saw them as, are you ready? Our little brown brothers. And we believed that they could not govern themselves. Um, Aguinaldo and his people went back into the jungles and then the more remote areas. They were guerrilla fighters. They were very good at it. And there was a protracted um, time period in which they fought against us, we fought against them, um, and horrible things were done. We were no better than a lot of the Spaniards who had been um, abusing, torturing them. We have debates at home about whether this is right. We have the imperialists that say, hey, if we can take over, we get to keep it. We have the anti imperialists saying, but didn't we fight a war to rid ourselves of that very thing? So we have this idea that, hey, if we can beat you up and take your country, we have the right to then rule you. And the other is no, everybody is do the right to rule themselves, self determination, until they prove they can't. Um, So we come out of that um, into what is called the progressive era. We are in another progressive era. I know you hear this on the news all the time. Well, the progressives want this, the progressives want that. It is very similar and yet really different. Um, both groups, 100 years ago and now, are pushing for change and reform that those that have been in power for a while don't believe is necessary or deserved or in many cases affordable. Um, most progressives are urban, middle class, and women early on. Um, women, because middle class women were not allowed to work. Most of these women had a fairly decent education and a lot of time on their hands. So when they saw a wrong they thought could be righted, they went for it. There are others, there are politicians. This is Robert La Follette, who wanted to reform society not just socially but politically, and starting what we call grassroots now at the local level, then going to state and going to federal. We got a lot of those reforms through at the local and state level, especially initiative, where we can come up with our own bills, our own laws, um, our own governing initiative, an initiative referendum where we get to vote on it and recall. We don't like you, Mr. Governor. We don't like you, State Senator. We don't like you, Mayor or Councilperson. We're going to have a recall election. Now, we can't do it if I just stand up and say, I don't like Sylvester Turner or Greg Abbott or whoever. It has to be based on a petition that is based on the number of people who voted in the previous election. It's not easy, but it shouldn't be easy to recall somebody elected by the people from office. The federal government, the progressives want them to regulate things. Um, things like, oh, I don't know, pollution, child labor, uh, education. That a lot of people are going, that's ridiculous. That's not what the government's supposed to do. This is Calvin once again begging to be adopted. Um, we have the Clayton Antitrust Act, so big businesses don't get together and I don't want to say corner the market because that sounds so innocuous, but run everything. In the economy, the Federal Reserve telling banks you can't charge these exorbitant amounts. You have interest. You can't um, deny people things because of their heritage or whatever. And then later, of course, in the 60s with the Fair Housing Act and everything, it said, no, you cannot look at the color of somebody's skin and decide whether or not you want to give them a housing loan. The environment is a huge push with progressives, the last group of progressives. We have Teddy Roosevelt, we have John Muir, we have a lot of people um, that are trying to protect things. You know that they were going to put in basically a millionaire subdivision at the Grand Canyon. They were going to put roads in. They were going to have these mansions facing the roads. Your backyard would be the Grand Canyon. The rest of us would never see it. And Yosemite, the Muir Woods. Um, oh gosh, what's the place in New Mexico where you get to climb up and see the Indian ruins? Places like that we decided to preserve for all of us. And Teddy Roosevelt was the preservingest president we had ever had. We want to expand democracy with initiative, referendum, and recall, which I just said, as well as the 17th and the 19th Amendments. Then we have World War I. We were neutral in thought as well as deed, said Wilson. It's a stupid war, fought for stupid reasons, not that the Archduke dying was not worth fighting for, but was it worth a world war? Or Was it something that we should have hauled in the black hand to a court in Serbia or Bosnia or Austria and held a trial and convicted all of them and put them in prison the rest of their lives, turning big rocks into little rocks? But no, we decided to have a world war with poison gas and razor wire and all kinds of horrible things. Civil liberties are restricted based on what you can and cannot say. When men go to war, those left behind have better job opportunities because those jobs are vacant. So we have a great migration like we did after the Civil War. Um, the Great Migration is primarily African Americans from the South going north to fill in jobs that are now vacant. We don't spend a lot of time on the war. This is U.S. history. This is not world history. We enter the war, we enter it late. We save a lot of people, but we save them not because we're better and brighter, although it could be argued that we are, but because we came in when everybody is exhausted. They've been at this for several years. They're tired, they're hungry, they're mentally and physically fatigued, they want to go home. We come in fresh, well fed, full of optimism, and we do. We really, really make the difference. The Treaty of Versailles, which starts World War II, is the treaty that ends World War I. Wilson's 14 points heavily influenced the treaty. He is not a proponent of punishing Germany like happened, but that is what the result was. If you look, the keystone, the thing that is going to hold this arch, that is going to hold this union together, is the United States. But there's a gap. Ask yourself why this is called Washington's Ghost. So the 20s come. Why are we scared of communists? Because of the Russian Revolution, the murder of the royal family, um, anarchists, things being blown up. So people are afraid to speak out. Those that do are very often punished. You could be called a radical for wanting free speech. There are immigrant quotas. There's the National Origins Act. There's the Emergency Quota Act. Meanwhile, our standard of living is improving, but our open-mindedness maybe is not. A young man named John Scopes, a coach and biology teacher, is arrested and issued a fine for teaching evolution in his biology class. Now, it's a setup. The ACLU had put an ad in the paper saying, hey, we're looking for somebody to do this. We want to test the law. Scopes contacts him and says, hey, I was going to teach it anyway. I'll be glad to be your guinea pig. Because he knew that his worst punishment would be a week in jail and like a $500 fine. So the ACLU sends Clarence Darrow, the most famous defense attorney in the world, plus a very elderly William Jennings Bryan. Well, the ACLU sends Darrow. Bryan comes to help out the prosecution. The thing is, Darrow makes Bryan look like an idiot. Asking things like, well, why weren't dinosaurs on the ark? And Bryan is forced to admit that, well, maybe not everything in his Bible is literal. Maybe some of it is parable, meant to tell a story. And Scopes is found guilty because, let's be real, he's guilty. He taught evolution in a state where it was against the law. That wasn't the point. The point was to bring national attention to the issue. Did it? You betcha. Time is about to run out, and I'm going to have to go into another video. I'm going to start right here. I'll see you soon.